Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Rick's Picks. So, Alien Earth just finished its first season, and being a huge Aliens fan, I had to watch it just to see what they did with it. And I got a lot to say about this. So, I do want to let everybody know that this video will have a lot of spoilers in it. So, if you haven't completed the series, or you haven't seen it, or you don't want to hear about spoilers, then, you know, this is not for you because there's going to be a lot of spoilers in this. Also, I want to mention that I just started a membership program on my YouTube channel. For a small monthly fee, you get a whole lot of extra content that nobody else gets to see. So, that being said, roll that intro. So the first thing we're going to get into is the plot. Now, this is going to be the last time I warn you guys. This is going to be chock full of spoilers for not only this movie, but some of the older Alien movies and what have you. So you have been warned. So now the plot for this thing is pretty basic. You got a spaceship on a long-term expedition into space to find rare monster or alien life forms that could be used for military purposes and what have you. Things go wrong on the ship. It crashes on Earth, but it crashes in a rival company's island. Therefore, they're going to fight for the rights against Whaling Eutonics for it. At the same moment, that company is also experimenting with putting human consciousness into cybernetic units and what have you. And of course, everything goes south, and then it boils up to what we will consider a climax or more like a cliffhanger and what have you. So that's the basic premise of the movie. So now we're going to talk about some of the main characters. Now, I'm not going to get into everybody because some of these characters really weren't that, special. They didn't really contribute much. They were just there just to be there. And you can't even say they were there for cannon fire because for the most part in this series, none of the main characters die except for two of them. So that is another issue with this series that I thought that these characters were never in any real sense of danger. So first off, you have Queen Mary Sue here. Now, it's a shame. In the beginning, she started out as a decent character. I was starting to like her. I thought, okay, she's a small kid inside her synthetic body, and she was going to grow on us. But then they turned her into overpowered Mary Sue person. For one of my gripes is that even though she's a synthetics are stronger than us, obviously because of mechanics. But to single-handedly beat a xenomorph with nothing more than a paper cutter, and trust me, I work in a school. We have these paper cutters. They're not that sharp. Not at least not enough sharp enough to cut through armor, which is basically how the alien skin is. It's armor plated skin. So for her to be able to take this alien out with just a paper cutter is beyond goofiness. It makes no sense, and I feel like that the writers and directors knew it made no sense. That's why that whole fight was off screen. Was so they don't have to, prove how she did it. They can just, use it to your imagination of pure fiction upon how this thing was able to be. And not only was she able to beat the xenomorph, but she had minimum damage. I guess it must have got a lucky shot off and got her head just enough damage so they can, do some sort of weird, repair sequence later. I mean, all it did was like you just see a little bit of white stuff drip out of her head and then she dropped. So, it wasn't like she got like any real damage. And that would have made it believable for me. If he would have opened up that door and she would have been like almost ripped to shreds and maybe have luckily got a, lucky shot on the alien to kill it, that would have been more believable to me. Like maybe if she was missing an arm or something. Because once again, she is a machine. they could always take her back to the lab and repair her. So it wouldn't be like she would be handicapped throughout the whole movie. But no, no, no. They couldn't have any major damage to her. She had to look perfect, just with a little bit of synthetic lubricant dripping out of her forehead. And she just got more and more powerful after that, because now she can control any computer for, that has any kind of Wi-Fi or anything to it. How? Don't know. They never explain it. They just say this particular synthetic can control everything. She's smarter. She's stronger. Throughout the whole movie, she was in series. I apologize. Series. She was in no danger. Nobody could beat her. She was like infinite power, and which was a shame, because when you find out that the bald-headed guy, I forget what his name, I'm going to call him, Kid Genius's dog, because that's pretty much what he was. He was his lap dog. When we finally find out that he's a cyborg, and she enters the room where her brother is, and he's looking at her, and she's looking at him, you think, oh, cool, we're going to get some cool cyborg fight between these two. Nope. She just waves his hands, and now he can't move because she has full control over him. So once again, this girl's OP to the max, and I feel like that character was really ruined. Now next, speaking of OP, we got Mr. Super Plot Armor here. And yes, I call him that because this man should have been dead 100 times over. I never seen such strong plot armor on a character before in my life. From the beginning when he's in the spaceship / crash building, and there's a couple times when the alien should have killed him outright. Nope, don't kill him. And then he's still in the spaceship, and there's a bunch of the eggs there. Well, he looks down at the egg, and the egg does what a xenomorph egg does, starts to open up, and the facehugger's getting ready to get him. And then he gets saved. Not by his sister, not by another Marine, not by anybody, but by the actual alien, which makes no sense to me. Because one of the alien's primary goals is for reproduction, to bring people back to the hive so they can be implanted with the embryo and what have you. So for this alien stopping him from, being face hugged made no sense to me at all. And they don't even explain why it did it. It just like, oh, okay. It's going to quickly jump and grab him and then take him off into the wilderness. I mean, if you want to argue, in the next episode, he said something about him being bait for a trap for her, which makes no sense, because I don't know why this alien would have been so hot to fight, his sister, but whatever, this guy has the plot armor of gods. I mean, he is like almost the weak Mary Silver, and he was annoying. He was like this wimpy guy. I think he was just there to move the plot along. He never made any really smart decisions or nothing. He was just like there for the most part to say, hey, I'm her brother, I guess, in an attempt to add emotional bond between him and this. And that's the other thing. He also gets attacked by the eye creature, and conveniently at the right moment he's rescued from that. I mean, we could go on all day about how many times this character literally should have been killed, but nope, the plot armor protects him. And next we got the boy moron here. And yes, I call him the boy moron because this man is nowhere near a genius level. As a matter of fact, I don't even think he's basic cognitive ready. This character did nothing genius in it. There was nothing smart about him. I think what the problem is the writers got the word genius and eccentric mixed up, because that's all he was. He didn't dress up in suits. He walked around barefoot. He acted goofy, and that was about it. But he did nothing intelligent in this whole series. Not a single thing he did that would make me say, this guy's smart, let alone a genius. But they said it over and over again. They kept on trying to drill it into your head because they sure the hell didn't show it. This character was a joke. And everybody says, well, there was a whole negotiation scene. No, that whole negotiation scene was garbage. And I'm going to tell you why. First off, I've known a couple of business people in my life. I'm not a real great business person. It's not my gig. But I know a couple of them. And I've even been into some legal proceedings and what have you. And the first thing that they would strike him down on is not being properly dressed. They are a stickler. Any business corporation, any judicial system, because in this series, the five big businesses are now running the world. So they're, business and government. So they're judge, jury, and executioner, basically. So the second a person like that would have walked into a room, they would have turned his ass right back around and said, no, you can't dress like that in this. You have to wear the proper attire. Two, the whole thing about him crawling all over the table and that kind of stuff, that was stupid. Because the reason why they put that in there was that was a distraction. That was a distraction from you noticing that this guy ain't that smart. Because his whole argument was, well, these things would have been, had to go through quarantine and stuff before coming to Earth and which is basic knowledge. That's basic knowledge for anything. Even nowadays, we have that. So if you're going to have like an invasive creature, like let's say from Australia, coming over to the United States, there would be certain quarantine measures before you can actually, do anything. So that's not even genius stuff. That's just basic. And Weyland Yutani herself, she wasn't that smart either, because he's rambling on about how her ship crashed, and she just said this, oh well, we were going to do it out in space, but the ship crashed. When she literally had proof that he sabotaged their ship. So because she had good old Cyborg here, sitting there, who had the information in his head about how he called up the ship and sabotaged and, hired one of the crew members to sabotage the ship. So she knew this guy sabotaged the ship. But why didn't she say, well, the only reason my ship crashed was because you infiltrated my broadcast and you had this guy sabotage my ship? But then again, the problem with that is if she would have said that, it would have had to have gone into an intelligent conversation, and this guy would have to be a real genius to maneuver his way out of that conversation, and the writers ain't that smart. So instead, they had him jumping around on the table like a stupid lizard, and walking around like a goofball to distract you from the factor that nothing intelligent happened in there. Nothing business-wise would have happened in there. The same with the moderator guy. He was a nitwit. He was just like, oh, okay, well, I guess it goes this way. I don't even know why. I don't even know why that scene happened. I think it was a poor attempt to try to make him look smart, and it failed. And throughout the whole movie, there's nothing smart about this guy. He's stupid, especially at the end of the series. First off, somehow, some way, he captured all the synthetics. How? Don't know. They don't really get into it. I think he just talked. And they said he put them in this cage that they didn't know how long they would last in the cage because of the factor it wasn't made for them. Okay? So he puts them in this cage, and, Mary Sue here starts doing her wiggly woggly whoosh 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 on the computers and taking over the whole place. Now, if this dude was any kind of genius, or even a smart person, you don't even have to be a genius for some of this. He would have installed fail safes on these dang synthetics. There should have been a fail safe system, if nothing else, a RoboCop Directive 4 on these things. That prohibits them to do any harm to anybody who is part of the Prodigy company, or at least a cut switch. Because that is what he should have done when he put these things in. Matter of fact, even in this beginning of the series, they talk about how they have limited power supply, that they do have to rest and recharge. That's why that goofy table with the halo that goes around their head, lights up, because they eventually need to recharge. So you would think instead of putting them in a cage, you would stick them into one of these recharge things that they're strapped down in and, can't do nothing. Because they even did that with the crazy redhead girl. After she went nutso, they kind of put her into one of those. So this character, not smart at all, not impressed with him at all. Next thing you go with, Mr. Blade Runner here. And he definitely looks like a Blade Runner ripoff. And he is supposed to be the one watching over the kids. He's supposed to be the scientist. He's supposed to be the caretaker. Now, he is a machine, okay? Now, at some point in time, he decides, for whatever reason, he wants to portray everybody. For what motivations, they don't get into. He just decides, oh, well, I'm going to just sit here and watch a xenomorph take over this other guy. And, oh, these kids are pulling some Weekend at Bernie stuff, but I'm going to let them go. I'm even going to show them the way out. There's no reasoning to his motivation, to why he portrayed, boy moron and his people that he was programmed to work with. Like, at least with the other Alien movies, when the synthetics portrayed the people, that's because they were programmed to. They were programmed in certain ways to portray the people. Like in the first one, he portrayed everybody because he was programmed to bring the alien species back under, any cost whatsoever. So, he was a cool character. I almost liked him, but they just took him into a whole different direction. Like, I liked that he was sort of a synthetic mentor to the kids. Like in the beginning, he's explaining to, Queen Mary Sue about the scorpions and stuff. And I thought, okay, this is a neat touch. This might be interesting. He even helped the one kid, Toodles or whatever, rename himself. And, he kind of seemed sympathetic and understanding why he wanted to rename himself Isaac instead of Toodles and what have you. So he was a good character up front, and then they started just going weird with him. And now you got Mr. Cyborg here. All right. Him, I don't even 100% get, because there's just so many goofiness in him. For one, what I can understand through this movie is he has limited cybernetic prosthetics. So he has a cybernetic arm, and apparently he has some sort of cybernetic implants in his head because he was able to download all the information from the crashed ship into his memory banks in his head. So he does have those cybernetics. Any other cybernetics that I'm aware of is nay. Those are the only two. They never mentioned anything else with this guy. He was kind of basic. He had his moments where I thought he was cool. He had his good moments. I feel like they underutilized his character. I feel like there could have been a whole lot more they could have did with him, but he was totally underutilized, and which is a shame, because I feel like he did have potential to be a great character. And then you get this guy here, who is probably one of the nicest characters in it, one of the characters that felt the most human, that you did have feelings for, that he seemed like a decent guy. And then they take him out by making him an alien, rape victim. And then, they turn him from that into Weekends at Bernie's, to where they just drag him all over the place and then, disgrace his body. I mean, it's a shame. He actually seemed like a pretty decent person. Then there's his wife. Now, the weird thing about him and his wife, they did not feel like a couple in this at all. If they didn't mention that this woman was his wife, you wouldn't even think about it, because they did nothing at all. There is zero chemistry between these two characters in this movie. Even when they fired him and told him to get out, she had no emotions. They don't even have a scene where she goes back to, I guess, their house or their apartment or whatever, and talk to him and feel sad. There was like no emotional connection between these two characters. And then near the end, all of a sudden, now she's the mother of the hybrids. Like, throughout the whole thing, she was basically just portrayed as some scientist, meant to work with them, learn about them, adjust them, and what have you. And now all of a sudden, she's the mother of cyborgs. Hybrids. So, those are some of the main characters. I could go into, then you also had this dude. I almost forgot about him. The easily manipulated one. Because of the factor that, Cyborg put a bug on him so he could communicate with him secretly, but not secretly, because they knew he was talking to him anyway, and he was basically his puppet. Now, this character had no common sense. I mean, yes, I know these characters were meant to be children, about 12 to 13 years old, put into a synthetic body. I keep on saying cybernetic, but they're synthetic body. So his consciousness was put into the synthetic body, and he made a whole lot of bad decisions. Now, everybody keeps on saying, well, Rick, he's a child in a body, so he's making child, decisions. But In the beginning of the series, they said their brains are AI assists to help them become more intelligent. So, yes, he may have some mental capacity of a child, but he has a computer inside his head helping him to make better decisions. So, that computer should have kicked in at a couple of times and said, no, you shouldn't do this. Or even childhood morals. Like when you see a monster burst out of a guy's chest and go running off into the mist, you know, you shouldn't be just like, oh, okay, well, we're going to haul his corpse all around the world. No. For one, there would be a sense of shock because, the child mind can't comprehend what just happened to it. Even with an AI assist, I'm sure the AI assist would probably help him process it and make better decisions among it, but still, it's a little bit of a mess for him. So I feel like this kid was just a complete moron. But then again, nobody was intelligent in this movie. Probably the closest one I would think would probably be, I think his name was Arthur. The one scientist who got chest hugged to death. So those are the basic main characters of the series. Now, in this movie, they had 5 basic aliens. So these were all picked up from, whatever planets or wherever the hell they went to get them. So, excuse me. So first off, you had these leech bugs. They served a purpose for about 5 minutes and then they were forgotten. They were there to have a couple horrific moments. They had their time in the sun. They vanished. Next, you got these fly creatures. They were only good on one episode because what happened was Toodles was brought into the containment area to feed these things. And then, of course, the one creature that eats metals and mechanical stuff and stuff like that was the one that Cage, conveniently failed. Now, I don't know if that was part of the plot, if somebody sabotaged it to fail to kill him or what. They never say. All you know is that it was damaged. So, they had a small part in that episode where he goes in, the door shuts behind him, because the sheep eyeball creature slams the stupid Cage, shuts the door. Now he's stuck in there with them, and then they, kill him. And then once they break out of there, they're easily disposed of any way, sorts of. So they were just basically a MacGuffin for an episode. Other than that, you don't ever hear of them again. So that's 2 of them. Next thing you know, you got the plant creature. They did nothing with it. It had 1 or 2 moments where you almost thought it was going to get somebody because it had its tentacle mouth arm thing come out and it looks like it was going to then zoop back up. So, it didn't do anything until I think it was like either episode 7 or 8 where the Marines go in there and then it has its 15 minutes of fame and then it's done. So those 3 aliens were all throwaway aliens. They're just there just to be there, to have a moment and then be forgotten. Now the big one everybody loved was the eye creature, and I thought this creature was actually intriguing of its own. I think it was a neat concept where what it does is it burrows into the eye, and I think what it does is it simulates the eye from it and then probably moves its tentacles into the brain and therefore taking control of whatever life form that it decides to take over. And it's a cool concept. I like the concept. It appears to be an intelligent being because throughout the series it just observes. It has a moment or 2 of intelligence, but just like any of the other creatures, they don't really do much with it. It has a few moments here and there that, for it to shine, but for the most part, they really don't do nothing with this. I would have liked to have seen them do more with it, but then it does something stupid because, apparently everything in this show has to do something stupid at some point in time. And to me, that stupid thing was to take charge of a corpse. So he gets, good old I think I'm saying this guy's name wrong, and I apologize because I just don't care enough about these characters to get their names right. But I'm going to call him Arthur because I guess that's the name I associate him with. So his corpse conveniently winds up on the beach. How? Don't know. Because it was almost like in almost like a, not a lake, but like a gulf that he was in when they just dumped his ass into the water and he sank to the bottom. And for some reason, his body was pretty well preserved when it wiped up onto the beach. If you ever seen what a body sitting in the water, especially ocean water, for a couple hours, you know, looks like, you can tell it would not look that nice. It would be bloated, it'd be nasty, it'd be totally unusable. But I guess they had to keep it somewhat, functionable so Eye Creature can take it over. And I don't understand why Eye Creature took this thing over. Because when, it was trying to take over Superman, and, Mary Sue came along and rescued Superman from it, because, plot armor has to work, and kicks it away, and then I think it goes down into a little sewer drain. Excuse me. There's a lot of people around. This thing could have picked any random person running through this building to, possess. But nope, it had to go outside and possess the corpse. I mean, I'm guessing that probably maybe the reason they did that was, let's say the drain that he went to may have just went straight out to the beach to drain whatever into the ocean. Would probably be their lazy excuse to why I picked Corpse Boy opposed to any of the 50, 60, 70 people or however many people running around like nitwits around the place, let alone any kind of indigenous, animals or whatever. But no, Corpse Boy was, the ultimate decision for that. And last but not least, and no, I didn't save them for last because they're the best. I saved them for last because they were not even the main character, and that's the Xenomorphs. I never seen the aliens so underutilized in any movie before in my life. This shouldn't have been called an aliens movie. It should have been called, Blade Runner, the prequel or something, because the alien, you could have taken this alien out, or the Xenomorph, whatever you want to call it, out of this movie and replaced it with any random kind of alien, and it would have worked because there was nothing tailored to this creature. Yeah, there's a couple odds and end parts in it where, alien stuff happened, but for the most part, it was easily replaceable. Because they went again everything that the alien is about in this series. All right, for starters, like I mentioned before, the original Alien, the first one that was on the ship. All right, so you have a ship full of people and also full of eggs. And not one person on that ship did that alien bring to any of those eggs. Not a single person on that ship that this alien brought to these eggs. And as anybody who is a fan of the franchise knows, there's three things an alien does with somebody. Either A, they attack for food, B, they attack because they consider you a threat, or B or C, they take you, and this is the primary one, for breeding purposes to the eggs or the hive. So this alien had a number of eggs on the ship and did not take a single person on that ship to those eggs. Not a single person at all. It just ran around and slaughtered them. Even when they crash landed on the planet, he ran around slaughtering people where there were still eggs sitting there. A xenomorph's job is to take things to the eggs, and that was always the scariest thing about them. Wasn't that, oh my god, this thing's going to kill me? It's like, oh my god, it's going to take me back to the hive where the face hugger is going to face rape me so a little creature can pop out of my chest horribly and painfully. That was the real scary thing about the aliens. It wasn't so much that they would kill you, it's what they did with you after they captured you. And that's one of my big things about this, was that this thing did not act like a xenomorph. Even the eggs, like when they're cutting the egg open to extract the face hugger, why they didn't just go through the opening on the top of the egg, or have something open it up and suck it on out, who knows? But no, I guess they had to do dramatic cutting down the side. And then you get they easily contained the face hugger. They had no preparation for any blood or nothing. They cut it open and no blood is shooting anywhere. It was just trash. And then they extract this little, sperm like creature, and then they put it into, Superman's lung that they conveniently have preserved because, the guy literally got ran through by one of the alien tails, which is barbed. The alien tails are always barbed, and somehow, some way, he was perfectly fine. They just replaced his lung with a cybernetic lung, and he was fine. Matter of fact, he should have been dead the second that tail ran through him, but nah, he was able to be carted out, go through, Superman, super plot armor man. So, back to where I was. So yeah, so they had it living in his lung. Why? Don't know. Anything I ever seen of xenomorph being impregnated into somebody, it's usually sitting in between the lungs, the hearts, and the ribs. So it's in there. It's nice. It's safe. It's not sitting in the lung. It's not sitting in the heart. It's sitting nicely in the middle, ready to burst. All right. So, the whole lung thing was stupid. And then they turned one of the scariest monsters in all horror franchise into a pet dog. Because, Super Mary Sue can talk to them. And she can understand their language. I didn't even know they had a language. I thought basically it was, a mental thing between them, like a hive mentality to where they function to protect the body. But no, it's individualized now. It has a language, and it's now this girl's pet dog. Through every single franchise of the aliens that I ever seen, nobody could control them. In the comic books, they try to control them, they escape. In the movie, the fourth movie, they try to control them, they escape. Even in Aliens versus Predator, after a while, the aliens got fed up with the Predator shit and they escaped. So the aliens are like wild animals. You cannot domesticate them. But in this movie, yeah, sure, Mary Sue, who could do everything, in the world that she wants, decided that she was going to domesticate the aliens. And, well, it works. So she has her two aliens because you have the original face hugger that came from her brother's lung, and then you have the other one that came through Arthur. So now she has her two pet aliens and all her little cybernetic friends, and they're going to take over the world. So the alien, I hate to say it, was probably the worst part of this series for me. All right, so now I'm going to just get into some general talking points. I could sit here all day long and talk about everything that I think was wrong with this series, everything that was right. This would be like a 4-day long video. So I'm going to just hit some of the highlights that I think they did right and some of the things I definitely think they did wrong. Now, some of the concepts in this, I think they did very right. I think that they had some neat concepts, but I do not feel like they belonged in the Alien universe. Or they could be in the Alien universe, just not in an Alien series. For starters, the whole thing with the hybrids, where they're taking human minds and putting them into cybernetic bodies, is a neat concept. It's not an original one. It's been done throughout history in all sorts of science fiction and what have you. But where they were going with it was sounding interesting. So they took, I think it's 6, terminally ill children, and they put them into these synthetic bodies. Okay. And in doing so, they're now debating on whether they actually transferred their consciousness into these things or whether the computer just rewrote their conscious on her. So did they really kill these kids and just created robots that act like them? Or did these kids' subconscious or conscious really go into them, or lack of a better term, soul? So you had a really neat storyline there about, the pros and cons of doing this, the humanity versus cybernetic. And you had a potential for a good story there. You really did. And, there was a couple of things, like one of the things they briefly touched on was the reason they use children because the child's mind can handle it better than an adult mind. So they're basically kind of going with the whole RoboCop thing, to where the reason why Murphy was able to become RoboCop and not go nuts was his sense of duty, opposed to all the other cops that went completely batshit crazy after becoming cyborgs. But with this, instead of sense of duty, it was youth. So there's a lot to go there. They also touched on things like, hey, look, they don't really have real emotions that were still trying to figure out how to make emotions work for them and stuff like that. So there was a lot of good stuff that they could have done with this. They could have done a whole series on that. And if it would have been done right, it would have been a really cool series. I would have really been interested, but it's kind of like a side quest in this. Like, sometimes they talk about it and then it goes away. And then like with the one character I didn't speak about in the things, you had, you know, female Ron Weasley here, where after she was attacked by the eye creature, she started talking about, I'm pregnant. Well, she's a synthetic body. There's no way it could have, gotten her pregnant. So they went nowhere with that. She just got sat in a little chair, mind wiped, and it was gone. Now, once again, that could have been something neat too. It could have implanted something. It could have corrupted, some of her circuits or did something to her, or maybe even left an egg or something in there, and you could have had a second eye creature breeding inside her, and her systems are picking it up. So there's a lot of cool things they could have did with these, synthetics that they didn't. And then in the end, I guess somebody, woke up and said, oh man, we got to do something with this concept of whether it was moral to put these children in there or not. So they did a quick grave scene, which should have been, like, if they were keeping to that being the main story, that should have been a turning point, because they could have did so much with that. Like, some of them could have said, oh man, no, it's me, I'm really here. Or, wow, am I just really a pro? And they could have did more with that. They did a little bit with it. They kind of did like a little bit of a like lazy, writing part to it, to where I think the one girl says, oh, I think I'm a human. And the other one, oh, I think I'm a robot. And then they didn't really do nothing with it. It was just, lazy writing. It's something that could have been great, but it wasn't. And that's the big thing with this movie. Series. I apologize. There's a lot of times they could have did great things with this, but they didn't. And everybody was written stupid in it. I don't think there was a brain among any of them except for poor Arthur. And because he was a smart person, he got face hugged. He was the only person who actually had any personality, had any character, had any sense of integrity, which was another funny thing, because so they wanted him and his, pretend wife, because I wouldn't call her real wife, because at no point in time did they ever act like husband and wife. They wanted them to erase, female Ron Weasley here because of the fact that she thought she was pregnant and there's nothing wrong with her. So they just figured, we'll erase it. Well, he was like, well, no, I'm morally against this. So they fired him. Okay, fine. He's going against the corporation. Fire him, whatever. But no armed escort, no changing of codes, nothing that would make sense when you're getting rid of somebody who is a liable risk against your company, who knows information, a lot of information about your company, and they're going to just let them go. Hey, pack your stuff, get on the next boat. Woohoo, you're out of here. And that was another big thing. There was no security in this place. You have these, potentially dangerous creatures. Nope, no security, no guards. When they break out of containment, no alarms go off. Nobody's aware of it. No warning. But then again, why should you be concerned? Because anytime they did escape, they pretty much snatched them up pretty easily. Like the baby xenomorph running around in the woods. I don't know how they found it. I don't know if they set traps or what they did. But, man, they caught that thing pretty easily out in the middle of the jungle. How? Don't know. But, plot needed them to capture it. So they captured it. And what have you. So, there was a lot of bad writing to this. So let's talk about episode 5. Now, episode 5 is the flashback episode. That's the one where it shows everything that happened to the spaceship before it crash landed on the planet. So the thing that I think the most about this episode was the factor that this should have been its own series. Matter of fact, this probably should have been season 1, because there was a lot to it that could have made this episode extremely interesting as a season. I mean, what it basically is it's sort of like a rehashing of the original Alien movie. They get the eggs, One of the xenomorphs get loose on the ship, slaughters everybody, then it crashes on the planet. But there was more to it. There was like stuff about like a saboteur going around sabotaging the ship. Somehow, some way, Boy Moron was able to communicate with the ship and, cause a saboteur. There was some, other dramas and stuff. And I think this would have really worked as its own season because there was a lot of interesting things that were in this episode that they did nothing with, or they could have expanded on to make it better. But this episode had the same problem that all the other episodes did, that everybody in it were morons. Even the assistant, he was like clinically retarded. And I'm not trying to say that to be nasty, but like the guy didn't know, anything about geology. I think it was like geology or biology, and the guy just wasn't smart. And I don't understand how somebody of that low intelligence could get a mechanical job on a multi-billion-dollar spaceship. You have to have some sort of intelligence to be able to work on something like that. Even like your household cars and stuff, you just can't get, you need to have some sort of cognitive abilities, and this character didn't have it. I don't even know how he could have got a job on a ship like that, to be honest with you. That's how low his intelligence was. And everybody else on the ship wasn't that much smarter either. The doctor, he was like a low grade doctor. He was like, right there with Nick from The Simpsons. Hi, everybody. Yeah, that's how smart this guy was. Or Zoidberg would have been a better doctor than this guy. But there was a lot of stupid decisions, but there was potential for some good storyline in it. Like I said, the security guy, Mr. Cybernetic, trying to figure out who's trying to sabotage the ship and all that intrigue as well. There could have been a great story there, but instead they smashed it all up into one episode. Like even with Boy Moron getting a hold of the ship, the ship that launched well before he was ever born, they could have put something in there like him spying on Yutani and then finding, information about some ship out there getting invasive stuff, him trying to figure things out. There's so much potential that episode had to be in a whole series that they just threw away. And that's a big thing about this series. They had a lot of potentially good stuff that they just trashed, that they just throw it out away. The eye creature, there's a potential for that to be something cool. Matter of fact, that's another thing about this. That creature probably should have had its own series because it was interesting enough that it could hold a series. It really could. And probably, to me, probably one of the biggest crimes of this series is how they treated the alien. Like the alien felt more like a side character in this whole thing. Like it's easily removable. It could always have been replaced by something else, and that to me, I feel like is the biggest crime of this series. Sorry about that. Is the treatment of the alien. It's like somebody read the cliff notes on it and just decided to put the alien in there, and they just wanted to use the name Alien to sell the franchise for something that is like completely nothing to do with aliens. Like I said, I'm still really pissed at this. Mary Sue actually was able to control the aliens. I think that was garbage. And they don't really do nothing with the alien until the end because they have it running around in broad daylight, which even in the second movie, they even said, hey, look, these things mostly attack at night. Mostly. So it's more of a nocturnal hunter than a daytime hunter. And I'm sorry, as cool as the alien is, there was times when that alien should have just been outright killed. Like for example, here where it's jumping out of the tree at the guy, and the guy has a pulse rifle pointed at it. That pulse rifle would have turned that alien into exploding green goo of acid all over the place. There was no way how that alien could have survived that. And even what there was like 5 or 6 other Marines there with guns pointed at the thing. Somebody could have hit it, especially at that close of range. They just, I didn't like how they did that. That alien should have been done. it's the same thing like when you watch Aliens, Alien 2, there was like hundreds of aliens, and the Marines, about, I think there's about several of them, were able to take out most of them before they were finally gone. The only reason why the aliens could even survive in that one was because they were actually somewhat intelligent creatures, almost to the lines of the raptors from Jurassic Park, where they could figure out different ways to sneak up on them. And that's the only thing. But a Marine with a pulse rifle and an alien straight up in front of them, no, that alien doesn't stand a chance. And that's just the reality of it. But they had this thing running around, killing everybody off screen, for whatever reason. Don't know, because there's still a couple of eggs sitting back in the facility that it could, take bodies to be impregnated. But, so the biggest flaw I had with this was the treatment of the alien, opposed to all the really, really bad writing in it. And that's just the killer of it. Is just, there was just so much bad writing. All the characters did really stupid things that you didn't really care about any of them. I didn't care about any of these characters except for, like I said, Arthur. Rest that guy. He was actually the pretty much somewhat decent person in the whole series. Everybody else, like I said, I can't even bother remembering their names. That's how forgettable all these characters were. And the mere fact that they all survived except for Toodles, who's the poor dude who got, into the thing with the fly and got killed, is another thing, because you never felt like any of these characters were any real peril in the series. None of them. I was hoping for them to kill off at least a couple of them, and then, what have you. And then it ends off kind of stupid. So all the remaining humans and the synthetic are all in prison. The synthetic, Cyborg, the mother chick, boy moron, they're all in prison. Why, the synthetics with their little pet aliens and, Super Brother are now, I guess, off to take over the world. Like I said, it ended with such a Blade Runner feeling. This show had more of a Blade Runner feeling than an Aliens feeling. I would have, felt better seeing this as a prequel to Blade Runner opposed to a prequel of Aliens. And that's the other big problem I had with this. This should not have been a prequel. This should have been a sequel. This should take place after Aliens 4. Because throughout the series, they're always trying to find this. Like, excuse me, in Aliens 4, they even say, hey, look, for the most part, Ripley got rid of these species, or at least around us, because she destroyed, the moon that this drone ship was on with all the eggs on it. And then she had a queen. She jumped into the lava pit, well, actually the molten metal, sort of like the Terminator, and killed herself and the queen. That's why they were doing all the cloning stuff, because there was none around them anymore. So it would make sense for a company to go for deep state space archaeological, search for these things after all that, and then come back with them. And I feel like they should have did something similar to the comics, where the aliens come to Earth, and because they're an invasive species, starts taking over the world. That would have been a cool storyline. That would have been really neat. Trying to see humanity trying to battle these things as they slowly branch out and breed. It would almost be the equivalent of a zombie apocalypse, which I think would have been a really cool storyline. I would have really liked to have seen them actually do that, similar to the comics. But instead, for some stupid reason, they did it as a prequel. And doing it as a prequel makes things muddy, because now you kind of have to try to keep in line with the other movies that were already made, this and that, and it just gets muddy. It just should have been a sequel. But the one thing I really, really did like that they didn't do was they didn't tie it in with the Prometheus movies. I'm not a fan of them. As far as I'm aware, they don't exist. I hate those movies. But similar to this, they did have some good concepts to it. It's just where they took it and how stupid the people were in that movie. Those movies I just couldn't. So that's most of my rant of this series. Like I said, I could go on about all the different things that I didn't liked about, but those are some of the key points of what I did and didn't like about this show. So I hope you liked this quick discussion about the Alien Earth TV series. If you did, go ahead and check out my sci-fi and horror playlist. And also, I just opened up a members account, so for a small fee, you get extra stuff that nobody else gets, and what have you. Plus, hit that like, share, and subscribe. They're all small clicks for you, but it really helps this channel grow. So, into the next one, late.